Hello and welcome back to another episode of Only a Bag, a travel podcast. I am your host, Nathaniel Mellor, and with me today
It's Darcy Melton.
Thank you for coming on to the show.
Thanks. Every time. I'm here every time.
I know, but it's nice to have you every time.
Thank you so much.
It's if it's just me talking to myself, I think people are far less interested, and I don't know if it'd be as interesting even.
I think the episodes will probably be 2 hours long each.
Oh, I would start getting on this thing and I just talk too quickly and I'm like, I don't know what I just said. Where was I? So thank you all for coming back and listening to this episode. If you're listening just after the last one, then you're right there with us. We haven't stopped talking since we ended the last one. And if you aren't, then welcome. I'm glad that you can pretend this is us at our freshest.
So last episode, we talked about differences between the North and the South.
Coffee and food.
We had a big plan to get this all in one episode, and it did not work. So in the last episode, we talked about how coffee is different between the North and the South, and how food is different between the North and the South, and then lots of other things because it took an hour long.
And also Mediterranean diet, and that was pretty much it. And then some social differences at the end.
Right. Yes,
well,
we
really
did.
just more social differences between America and Italy, but still.
Which is how we're kind of going to start talking. What we're going to start talking about in this episode is people and the culture of people, I guess.
And to be clear, these are ridiculously broad generalizations.
Oh, yes.
So if it's kind of like in America, if somebody's like, the difference between the people of the North and the people of the South, and it's like, you have no idea what you're talking about. There's no broad generalization you can make between the people of the North and the South in probably any country, unless like, I don't know, there's got to be some tiny country that you could be like, yeah, this big, like Cuba is not very different. So I think the East and West is more than North and South, but I have no idea.
Maybe I have no idea.
But I feel like, I mean, there's no broad generalization you can make of the people between the North and South.
100% accurate.
Yeah. And Italy's the same. So it's not, please don't like think this is going to be, it is more, I think, to let you know as a tourist what to expect from people of the North versus people of the South. And if you've had bad experiences with people in the North, ideally it's just like we just want to throw in some information of what might have led to that. In the sense of
what if people had bad experiences with people in the South?
Oh, well then, yeah. Don't know what to tell you.
That was a generalization right there. Ugh, if you've had bad interactions with these Northerners over here.
Well, I'm thinking, because I guess the first thing to jump into is the North is, for like, what, 400 years, 500 years? I mean, the North has been like inundated with tourists.
Yeah.
I mean, there's these like diary journals from the 1600s about people visiting Venice and being like, overly tired with the tourists in Venice.
Yeah.
Like, oh, this place has been like known for too long, and that was in 500 years ago, 400 years ago. I think Bologna is similar. I mean, it's like these places. I mean, they look gorgeous. Let's not lie. Like, of course, come on.
There's reasons people go there.
Yeah, there's a reason that people have gone to Venice. Somebody was like, we should build this on the water, and other people are like, you're not going to understand how beautiful and this is going to be in like 200-300 years. Unlike, I guess, in southern Italy, we're like, we should make this look like a cave, and everyone's like, brilliant. No one's ever going to visit. No, but I think at the same time, the South like had its heyday, I think, in many ways. Pompeii, Capri, Herculaneum, Baia. It was for many hundreds of years.
BCE
to like early CE, yeah.
Okay.
But like Pompeii and Capri and Herculaneum, Baia were all and Naples were all thermal springs. And Campania was kind of known for, especially the coast, obviously, was known for a place of relaxation. There's a famous town called Baia, which is next to Naples, and today it's just like it's a neighborhood, a quartiere of like a different town. It's not very famous today, but it's one of the very few places you can swim in like underwater ruins of an ancient town that basically fell. But it was known for its hedonism. So you can imagine that when it fell into the water, I imagine a lot of people were like, see, I told you so. But no, there's a famous line by Seneca the Younger, who is if you're into Stoicism at all, he was a big writer of the Stoic ideals and what it means to be a Stoic. And he was saying that when the great general from Carthage, Hannibal, went to Baia, he lost basically his bloodlust, all of his edge, his
vigor is the word
vigor
he used, right?
is the word he used. Yeah, and it's just like he spent a winter in Baia and
got too soft
soft. So that's what the South is bringing to the table. No, I think that's the thing. Like the South has for centuries, it had been known for something, for this idea of something, and then of course, once the Roman Empire fell, basically nobody was really coming south anymore. Like, lest you're not going to go into a foreign kingdom to go to the beach. It's kind of like not worth it.
And I mean, Italians definitely come to the beaches down here
Oh
today.
my God,
Like they're
yes.
super popular. The Mediterranean coast in the south, in Campania and Calabria, and obviously Sicily, super popular. But I think for international tourism, the north is much more popular.
Yeah, I think it's a fair way to put it. So, and that's what I mean. Like the people in the north are a little, in our experience, they were just a little bit more tired of the tourism. And part of it is not just like, oh, for 20 years we've been a popular city. It's like my parents were in the tourism industry. My grandparents were in the tourism industry. I'm in the tourism industry. None of us, like being treated. I mean, if you've ever worked in food, retail,
Any
restaurant,
service
hospitality,
industry sort of thing, yeah.
then you've probably seen what it is to be treated by somebody, especially poorly. And it's not a great feeling. And I think it's like, you can easily bring that to the next, like as a waiter, as easily you can bring it to the next table. Like, if you're treated poorly by one person, you're going to that next table angry and annoyed. Retail, the same thing. If people have just been throwing clothes at you or whatever the hell it is, then I imagine you're going to bring it to the next person. So all that is to say is in the north, we had a little bit more experiences with people who are snappy or
just even more like not standoffish, but a little less jovial, maybe. Which is not like every person. I mean, people in the north are just people, and they're all nice, by and large, because people hopefully are nice by and large. But I think, like you're saying, especially in the highly touristy areas, and like the coffee shops around the big monuments and things like that, people are definitely a little bit more cold.
Yeah.
Rightfully so.
And one of the things, honestly, though, it changes when you speak a little Italian. I think like when we're treated, I think, quite coldly when it was like you and me, and even when we were traveling with your mom and my dad, it was kind of in English, and then we switched to a bit of Italian to like ask questions or directions or something like that, and then it's like, oh, you speak Italian? What's up? Okay, yeah, you're gonna go. So what are you guys doing here? It becomes whole conversation. And we had some great experiences and great conversations with people in bakeries and cafes, and any people just once they knew. I don't know. There's also a sense of like, especially in the South, I think a lot of people there's a bit of embarrassment. Like everyone wants to know what you're doing here, but no one wants to ask because no one wants to come up to you.
Absolutely. So they just end up staring at you.
Oh yeah, no, that's the. And actually, you're probably gonna get stared at a lot in the South, not in Naples or the Amalfi Coast or Sorrento or anything like that. They're used to tourism.
I'm also sure like big cities in Sicily as well. They're totally used to it.
And Messina and things like that. This is more like small. If you're driving around, renting a car, checking out some more hidden beaches. Trying to get off the path a little bit to kind of figure out what else is out there, then you're going to get just a lot of stare. People are going to be curious, like, what are you doing here? And that's the biggest, if you speak Italian, the biggest question is people are going to ask, like, why are you here? Yeah. And it's not like in a bad way. It's not like, why are you here? It's why are you here? And it doesn't matter. You have family from the area, and they're like, yeah, but you wanted to come visit them? Like, okay, all right. No, I'm just checking. Especially if you're American. I mean, there's still I think very much this idea that like, oh, America, yeah, San Francisco, Miami,
New
York, exactly. Brooklyn, which
I love when people list the places in America that they know.
Yeah,
it's awesome. And then everybody's like got a cousin in New York, and they're like, do you know Giuseppe in New York? I'm like, I don't. I'm so sorry. That sounds. I mean, I don't mean to sound condescending. It really is great. I love people like, yeah. You must, like, I know you. You must know him. Yeah. It's a small world, and it totally
Especially
is.
if you've never been to Manhattan or Brooklyn, because it's like we met somebody who's like, oh, I have family living in Brooklyn, and I'm like, yeah, New York, and they're like, I don't know, I think Brooklyn. And I was like, yeah, okay, and they're like, do you know them? I was like, well, it's a lot bigger than it is here. I'll tell you that. So
it's sweet.
I don't think I know them. But that was all to say. I think the people in the North, in general, and this is a huge, broad generalization, is just. Much more used to tourism.
And it's a bit more transactional because they're so used to tourism, I think.
Yeah. And in the South, it's still, for a lot of the South, I should say, again, not these major areas, Bari, probably not. Matera, honestly, still quite new to tourism, despite the fact that Matera was like the 2019 European City of Culture. And it's only been kind of well known in that sense for like 20 years. It's still very fresh to tourism. So that is all to say, in the South, you're going to find a lot more curiosity from people about what you're doing here, what you're seeing. Do you want to go this? Do you want to do that? People offering you rides to go places. People be like, I could take you to this. Oh, you got to see this thing and blah, blah, blah. And I mean, it's like not uncommon that people invite you to lunch here.
Oh, for sure.
Not uncommon that I don't know, just like it's sort of like this idea that we're immediately going to be friends, and then so it's sort of again that's a gross generalization. You're maybe not actually friends, but they're just, I mean, everyone's just curious. And
And people in southern Italy really want to share their culture. And I'm sure in the north they do as well, but they've had so much more opportunity to do that with many more tourists. So it does seem like people down here are just excited for like a cultural exchange, you know, and to tell you about their stuff, their life, their place.
yeah, and I think again, I mean, as I know we're moving on because the red light's on, it means my time's up. But no, I think that, again, these are just broad generalizations. You might have a very different experience in the South. You might have a very different experience in the North. You might find people ruder in the South, ruder in the North, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. One last thing note is that we have a friend in Sorrento who've asked a couple of times about the North versus the South because he worked all up and down Italy, and we've mentioned wanting to move to the North, and he's like, oh, the North is beautiful, but the South is like is home. It's where the people are just amazing. It's the food and this and that. And he's like, the North is for everything else it's fantastic, but it's not like the je ne sais quoi of the South, except I don't know what that is in Italian, the non lo so of the South.
Yeah, exactly.
But it's got that certain something.
Absolutely. That's a good way of putting it. It's like not tangible.
Yeah. So I think we did pretty good there.
Yeah, that was pretty fast. I like that.
What's next?
Okay, so two kind of quickish topics are cash, money in the South versus the North, and we touched on this 2 episodes ago, I believe.
And the history 2 episodes ago, because that would be the history episode, the first one of this series.
Okay.
And then in the special finance episodes, we touched on it.
Okay.
And essentially, it's just to say, cash is still very much a predominantly used currency in the South. If you can bring cash around, ideally bills smaller than 20, which leaves you with a 5 and a 10 euro bill, 1 and 2 euro coins. That would be the best because a lot of people will not really want to break it. Like in the States, you could go in almost anywhere and break 100 or a 50 and a 20 without an issue. And here people will be like, I would rather not serve you than have to break this 20 euro bill. So it's a bit of a...
Or they'll send you around to other places trying to break it and then like, come back.
Yeah, come back when you've get something smaller. But nobody wants to break it. So that is something.
I tell people this who visit this small town we live in, is that I love that if we ever try to use a 50, people like, for groceries or for coffee or whatever, they're like, nah, it's fine. You just have it and pay me later. So we'll just rack up this debt around town because we can't break the 50.
There's a famous, for anybody who's like, oh, that sounds like a story. There's a famous short story, and I think it's called the 500-pound note or the 5,000-pound note, and I can't remember which one it's called. And it's a British short story. The pound there was the giveaway. Written in the early 20th century, late 19th century, about a guy who basically forges, and I wish I could remember, it's a 500 or 5,000, I want to say 500 given the time period, pound note, and, goes to the bar and, has stew and beer and tries paying, like, no, that's too big, no, we can't, come back when you've broken it, and gets a new suit and pays rent and all sorts of things and can never break it. And part of it, they all think he's really wealthy, so he's good for it, so of course they're going to give it to him. I don't remember how the story ends, honestly.
But it was forged, right?
Yeah, it was forged.
Okay.
So it was like, and based, but nobody can call him on it because he's,
And isn't the thing that people, the other characters in the story had never seen a bill that high, so they couldn't identify that it was not real or something.
And I don't think it even was. I mean, I think that was the thing. It's like they just assumed wealthy people had 500-pound notes. And that's, I think, it's very similar feeling here where it's like, if everything's under 2 euros, nobody wants to break it, so you just keep going around.
Yeah, it's quite sweet.
And of course, there is still that sort of system where people do like, yeah, we have your name on a thing, you owe us 15 at the end of the month or whatever it is. So if basically cash is still one of the most used currencies in the North, we found that card. Almost everybody has a little card reader now. In the South,
much
too,
more like the States, where you're just tap and go.
You're tap and go, whether it's the phone, either your card, whatever it is. It's much easier. The South is definitely catching on, but it's silly in the sense that, like, I mean, even getting gas 9 times out of 10, these places do not have a card reader. You're going to need cash.
I hadn't thought about that.
Yeah. Like everyone has a bundle of cash in their pockets, by the way. So if you pay for gas, they're pulling out a wad of like 4,000 euros, all 50s, and they're like licking their thumb to go through it. And they're like, I got a 5 in here somewhere, trust me. So there's just that kind of energy of everybody has like just a giant wad of cash. So I guess it's a safe country. So cash and...
Healthcare is another quick one. If you're a tourist here, if you're not staying for very long, the healthcare system isn't going to mean very much to you. Like you said earlier, Nathaniel, I think off mic, is that if you're just here visiting, if you have an emergency, there's going to be some sort of emergency room probably near you, or a hospital near you, no matter where you are. So you're going to be fine.
Yeah.
And you likely, if you go to the emergency room, they have to treat you,
Yeah.
right? And you likely will not be charged.
If I'm not mistaken, and again, it's one of those things, silly little things where I'm like, I've been to the emergency room, I haven't been charged, I didn't show anything, I just was like, what's your name? Here's my name. Okay, great. Take a seat, we'll call on you. It's very much like we see everybody and charge no one. But again, that your mileage may vary.
And weirdly, that might be different between the North and the South. I really don't know. I heard some story like more 15 years ago. I have no idea. About somebody who was visiting Italy and they asked for their American insurance card, and then tried to charge them a lot of money. That's the only story I've heard like that. I really can't say, but I know here we have not had any problem getting emergency care.
Plus, if you do need to see a doctor, there are a lot of private doctors. There's websites for like Mio Dottore and like for finding doctors.
Quite low cost.
They're quite low cost. I mean, incredibly low cost for an American. They're quite low cost for Italy.
But under 100 euros a visit, would you say?
Yeah, depending on what you need, though. I mean, I don't want to like, but like as far as like if you're I mean, I'm saying this as far as if like don't come to Italy for healthcare. I mean, you can for sure if you think it's great. There are other countries with better healthcare.
Yeah.
So if you're doing
this is like a, if you have to.
Yeah, if you're doing health tourism, I would definitely suggest a different country. But if you're doing like if you're here and you broke a tooth, there are private dentists that can see you same day, next day kind of thing. I mean, I've gotten cavities filled here for $40 each. You can do the root canal for usually 100, 150 with a cap put in afterwards. I mean, it's again, your mileage may vary, but by and large, like if you're like, oh my god, I just broke a tooth, I need emergency dental care, I broke my wrist, go to the pronto soccorso, the emergency room. You slipped and fell, something like that. And in the summer, we've talked about this so many times in the Rome episodes, but in the summer, if you're feeling faint, if you're feeling dehydrated, if you're feeling all of a sudden very chilly, which is a terrible sign, obviously, when it's in the middle of the summer, definitely go to the hospital. They are very much trained to treat heat stroke, heat exhaustion. So this is just more of like, I mean, one of those things that nobody wants to plan on being hurt or sick when you're abroad, but I mean, on the off chance you have, you get an infection or something like that, like a bacterial infection, or you pick up something weird on the plane and you're like, I am not getting rid of this cough or this.
I thought you were going to say if you pick up something weird on the ground.
If you pick up something weird on the ground and you're like, this is a weird looking muffin. I don't know. Imagine there's like pastries always fall on the ground.
I thought someone got infected from picking something up off the ground.
That could be it too.
Not really a thing that happens.
I don't know if it's ever happened, but I like that. I like that you're like, this could happen. No, but I'm just thinking like, those types of emergencies. There's a lot of travel insurance out there basically that does also cover like medical emergencies, things like that.
That's a good point.
But I've always found in Italy you don't really need it unless you have a severe medical emergency and you need to be like
hospitalized.
Or I was thinking like medevac to like Germany or something like that, where they're like, yeah, there's like one specialist in all of your. I mean, something really ridiculous, not ridiculous, but like
intense
and outside the realm of what's typical. But by and large. Because I'm also thinking people get off the plane after sitting for nine hours, like deep vein thrombosis or something like that, where it's just like I have a blood clot. It's like, yeah, doctor.
Yes, absolutely. Don't be scared to go to the hospital.
Yeah, so that's a big thing. And of course, if you're coming here for healthcare, you can totally come for healthcare. I realize I'm like, don't come to Italy for healthcare. No, but like if that's what you want to do, go for it. Yeah, it's good. The North has great healthcare. It's just
that's one of the quickly just to go over it. Is that the North and the South vary pretty widely, deeply, in their healthcare. And this is something that a couple of episodes ago we talked about the history of how the Piedmontese, basically the very north part of Italy, decided to become one country and
sort of unilaterally.
Yeah, they were like, we're going to do it. It's so great for you guys. And then they just kind of smushed their culture all over the rest of the country quite quickly. And they were super wealthy compared to the South. They had is it free market economy? Is that what it's called? And one of the things that has lingered here in this country from that, which was not very long ago, is that healthcare in the South just was never funded well enough compared to the North. So the funding for hospitals and public health is not as great in the South as it is in the North. So even Italians in southern Italy will travel to northern Italy for certain procedures and different kinds of healthcare.
Yeah, exactly. That's a succinct way of putting it. Yeah.
Thanks.
So health. I mean, better. I'm over here 15 minutes later talking about healthcare still. So I think that's better, way better than me. I'm long-winded. Healthcare.
Yeah, was that good?
Yeah, beautiful.
Okay.
I think
Transportation.
yeah. Let's
Let's get into that.
yeah. Maybe can you make that one succinct?
Let me try. Okay. So, again, another thing that is very different between the North and the South and could quite possibly be greatly affected by Italy becoming one country is that transportation generally in the North is more comprehensive. You can get around more easily on public transportation in the North than you can in the South.
And by public transportation, just to clarify, you mean from city to city or within one city?
Both.
Because I would say that Naples and Salerno have pretty comprehensive public transportation within the city.
Yeah.
I mean, Naples doesn't have like a ton of
it's not a ton, and it's not that well funded. I mean, it's like rickety and from the 1920s. It's not. No, the subway's in Naples.
I think that actually the
Very
Naples
old.
subways is one of the oldest in the world.
Yeah.
But they have new lines and new the trains are new. I mean, like every third train is new.
Yeah.
No, I only mention that because it's like their subway is difficult because they do have to basically.
There's so much under the earth.
Yeah, that you can't just be drilling
You can't just
randomly.
put a tube, dig out a trench to put your
Not to mention
train
that they
in.
keep doing stuff with volcanoes in Naples. So I'm like, you do the wrong hole, you get this magma thing going on.
But you're right. It is one of the oldest like subterranean.
And they have
Train
tons of buses
systems.
in Naples.
Yes, that is true. And the Rome public transit system inside of the city of Rome is quite comprehensive.
Absolutely, yeah.
So maybe you're right. But between city to city, it's more comprehensive than the South. I guess I was thinking smaller towns south of Rome.
Oh, I see what you're thinking. Okay.
Have like not a lot.
No, I think it's a good point. Yeah, no, because like smaller towns, like I'd say smaller cities, larger towns, don't have any. Where in the north you might have a couple buses
Yes.
or something like that. Like, I mean, we don't have a Siena-sized town down here that I can think of off the top. We do have probably tons, but like by and large, cities will not pay for public transportation in the south just because it's like,
Well, okay. So one kind of easy comparison in my mind is Autolinea Toscana, right? Is the Tuscan auto line, and it goes through many small cities and large towns and big cities in Tuscany.
and small towns. Hiccup.
You did. And I mean, it'll come a couple times a day through your town, both directions, and you can find their information online.
Yeah.
That is one of the biggest differences. So it works like a fairly normal public transportation system, if you imagine one in your mind. Where in the South, where we are, there's maybe one bus a day that comes to town, and their schedule doesn't really exist
Not at all.
online anywhere. It's not posted anywhere. Some cities will have some bus schedules posted, but they also are not necessarily up to date. A lot of the buses in the South are private bus companies, like they are in the North. It's a private bus company. It's not like a nationalized system. So it's a private bus company. And now they run basically as school buses. So sometimes if there's a high school or an elementary school in the town where you are in the South, buses will come and go. And I think sometimes you can take them, but they really are meant for school kids, and they come at the time of day when school starts and ends. There used to be more train lines in the South than there are today. I mean, the tracks still exist there, but a lot of the trains journeys were stopped. You'll notice too, whenever you go from, for instance, like Rome, there's the train line to Reggio Calabria, which goes along the western coast, and then at a certain, does it go directly from Rome over to Bari, or do you?
I don't know if there's that or a switch or something like that. Yeah.
So at some point this is an option to jaunt across to the other side of the country and go down that coastline. But in between there, not a lot of train systems. Where in the north, it's more of like a tree-like structure.
Yeah, because are we talking about like again Campania? Just like besides the train line on the coast, there is not really another one. I mean, a lot of them end. There are towns in like bases. There's Naples and there's Eboli and Battipaglia, and there's a kind of bigger, small cities outside of Naples, and that would be where the train ends. And it used to continue all the way down through Campania into Calabria and on. And I think they stopped at Eboli and Battipaglia because they're like nobody is getting on these trains anyway. Basilicata has very few trains, it seems like, to anywhere. I don't know what Puglia has. But again, as you mentioned, like basically they stopped a lot of these trains because of lack of ridership, which is a little difficult because I mean, it's a little difficult because it's like, yeah, but there's still people here. And so now
you need to get around.
Yeah. And they did replace some of it with a bus.
You can take a bus to different towns in the south. It's not impossible, but it's not that easy.
Yeah. And however, if I may, while we're talking about it, just we're talking about transportation, this is mostly a warning for anyone who wants to kind of get off the beaten path a little bit. If you're in Naples and you want to go to see Pompeii, there are about 4,000 trains a day to Pompeii.
Yes.
As of 2 months ago, as of sometime in July, every Sunday they run a direct train from Rome to Pompeii. It's a fast train and it gets you there in like 2 hours or 2.5 hours. There are trains and buses to Sorrento. There are trains to Salerno, which, as we mentioned last episode or 2 episodes ago, is the gateway to the Amalfi Coast. There are buses up and down the Amalfi Coast because you cannot build a train line there. And you kind of have to take a bus, if I may recommend anybody listening. The Amalfi Coast has a odd and even license plate rule. Like some days of the week are only for odd license plates, some days are only for even license plate. If you're renting a car and you don't know which day it is, you will get fined if you're driving on the wrong day. So basically riding in a bus is so much easier. And honestly, if you've seen those roads, man, I trust those bus drivers. Those people.
It's insane.
We've driven on the roads once,
turny,
and it was
skinny,
like,
off a cliff.
It is not remotely like you see those like ads I think for cars and they're driving like on like, oh, that looks beautiful.
Like a nice little sports car, switching gears, and it's luxurious. They're like looking over at the sea, like, oh, honey, would you like a cocktail later? It's not like that.
Not to mention the Amalfi Coast Road, as we mentioned one episode at some point a while ago, and we'll probably talk about it again when we talk about the Amalfi Coast. It's like people seem to think that road is sort of just like the main walking boulevard of the Amalfi Coast. So you have tons of people, and to be fair, it was 50 years ago.
And you're allowed to walk on that road.
Yeah,
and
very much.
There's a beach that we went to that it's very much, the land is connected to the town, but the entrance to that beach, you have to walk along the highway for a minute.
Yeah, and that's what people do. It's like they're just walking and just talking. They have their groceries, blah, 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 blah. Yeah. And people are, it's like the little intercoastal highway.
Cars whizzing by.
Ridiculous. So all that being said is, if you're in these sort of major areas, you're going to be fine. The entire coast of Campania, at the very least, everywhere you probably want to see is connected by train. Most places have a bus if it's not by train. Into Calabria, it's the same thing. There's a train line running the entire coast down to Reggio Calabria. So if you're like, I want to go to Tropea, see the beach, see the onions.
Or get to Sicily. You can take the train down there and then take the ferry over to Sicily. And
I don't, you take a bus too. And I'm pretty sure they just pop you onto the ferry. I don't think the bus goes onto the ferry. I think it's just you personally going to the ferry. Yeah. And then you go from Reggio Calabria to Messina, and then you switch to either another train or a bus. So there's a lot, just as a thing. It's more like if you're trying to get to, I think Matera is like maybe is a little more difficult to get to, but I think there's still some comprehensive transportation there. But it's like, essentially, if you're thinking, I want to get some far-flung places, I want to see the real southern Italy, I want to get some experiences that.
And something we've talked about before, I think, is like day trips, are much easier. Like if you think you're taking a day trip from Florence to Siena to San Gimignano to like all these little places, that's pretty feasible. Where in the south, it's just not as easy because the transportation doesn't come as frequently, and the infrastructure for it just doesn't necessarily exist.
Absolutely. No, I think, that was a good succinct, that was a 10-minute way of putting that.
Nice. Thank you. One quick thing I do want to mention, it's just like everywhere. The roads vary by, like, I guess the road intactness, the road quality,
yeah.
varies by region. I love Basilicata, but I guess their infrastructure funding is not great. So we were driving along one day. We weren't driving, we were riding along one day. And the driver kind of went over it, kind of swerved. And through this, like, it was more than a pothole. It was a crater in the road.
But then also just turned to sand there for like
Yeah,
40 feet. It was just like the road just like
the
anyway.
regular asphalt, like main thoroughfare, just turned to sand.
Yeah, so I wasn't really sure what was going on there. However, if you do drive, actually, it's good. Glad you brought that up. I personally believe renting a car in the South is an unparalleled way of seeing the South. You and I, every time we take the bus, it's nice. Then we drive around, and it's just so many things that are hidden. There are these like monasteries hidden in between like mountains that you'd never see otherwise.
Which you can completely get to by car.
Yes, yeah.
It's just the bus isn't going to take you there.
There are tiny towns that are gorgeous and they're hidden, and I mean they're full of people. They don't have a bus, or if they have a bus, it doesn't really go anywhere near it because they're assuming anybody who's going to and from there has a ride to and from the bus stop. No, I mean, I'm just thinking going to the beach. There are so many beaches along the coast that you need a car to actually get to the more interesting, the hidden ones, the ones that have some history, the ones that have something interesting happening. There's also, especially in the spring and the fall in the South, it's like every town has some kind of festival, whether it's for chestnuts, whether it's for onions,
in the summer.
In the summer. But I was thinking like it does kind of, that's true. I was thinking about like the food festivals, like artichokes and asparagus. Yeah. And that's all in the spring, and then it kind of like peters out, and then in the fall you get like chestnuts and whatever else there are, like apples and stuff like that. They're harvesting and the olives. There's so much to see, I think, with a car. So if you have the ability to rent a car and drive around, we've noticed that it's quite it's not better than the North, but because the North has such comprehensive transportation, you're not really going to necessarily need a car unless you really want to get into some really hidden places, very off the beaten path. But it feels like it's just like it's very difficult to sort of like penetrate the interior of southern Italy without a car, essentially. Yes. And it's been like that though for forever. I mean, I just think that because I know we have to finish this part up, but even like, I mean, if you look at these ancient maps of Italy, the Magna Grecia maps, things like that, the Lucanians were all in this sort of center of southern Italy. And for like, I mean, after they lost to the Roman Empire, but like for hundreds of years, if not 1,000 years, nobody bothered them because there's nothing we need there. There's no strategic like benefit to having.
They were all just here hanging out, unbothered mostly.
Yeah, so I think it's one of those things where, I mean, again, it very much could be since the unification, but also it's just nobody has ever needed the center of southern Italy, despite the fact there are some really fascinating sites here, some fascinating like heritage sites, as well as just things to see, as well as just like historical sites, ruins and food and things like that. So if you're renting a car, just keep in mind the individual roads, or the comune, the city kept roads and the region kept roads aren't great sometimes, but the highways, which almost all of them start with A, so it's like A24 and A2 and A whatever, are federally established highways, funded highways, and those are perfect. They're beautiful because there's never a pothole, there's never a crack on them. There are gorgeous.
They're frequently maintained. It seems like as well.
But it's also because people are going like 90 miles an hour on them, so it's kind of like you hit a pothole in the wrong. I mean, not really supposed to, because there are speed limits, believe it or not. But the speed limits are not posted anywhere. They're just sort of, everyone just knows, because apparently to pass the driving test in Italy, you need to know the speed limits of roads when there are no signs.
Oh yeah, if you're going to be driving here, that's a good note. If you're going to be driving here, that's a quick Google search. You can look it up. I think it's like 80 kilometers an hour is
on the highway. I think 120.
What's 120? What's 80? 80 somewhere. Is that France?
I have no idea.
Okay, 80 is in my mind, but you're right. It's 120 on the highway kilometers.
Except when it's raining, then it's 90. And then they don't really have. There is pretty much never going to be a traffic cop that stops you and says, "Hey, here's
and then
a
it's like 35 or something super slow in towns, right?
Yeah, it's like 30 or 35 in towns, and then 50 or 80 between towns, depending where you are. Usually that is marked, I will say. Almost always they'll be marked, but not in towns. In towns, everyone just knows don't go over 30, which is like 15 to 20 miles an hour.
Yeah, it's quite
slow.
And
then once you get outside the town, you can get back up to like 30 or 40. But again, if you haven't driven in Europe or Italy very much, just imagine a road that's about half the size of American roads, typically.
Yes.
I imagine English roads, honestly, and Italian roads are probably very similar in size, just given what we saw when we went around the countryside of Scotland, which is not necessarily England at all, but Scottish roads. No, I'm just thinking that they have smaller cars and they're much more used to smaller roads. But in America, we have even just sort of like country roads are still 2 lane, and here it's half of a lane, and you both have to share it and get onto the shoulder when you're passing. So I think that's everything for transportation.
Yeah. It
made it 5 minutes longer. It's amazing.
So, kind of, I guess, dovetailing, similarly, the South is chaotic. If you have not gathered that by what we've been saying, and it's not zoned really, at least in Campania, and it seems like Calabria as well. Basilicata,
because you have people like drilling for oil or natural gas right
near
next
a house.
to a house or farms, or it's there's not really much.
It's not structured really. It's wild. So that is something to keep in mind, that there will be like a factory right next to a farm, which is not related, right next to an apartment building.
Well, it's actually, and that's good information. I think one of the reasons it's important is if you're trying to stay outside of a town, if you're like, I want to stay in the countryside, and you see a picture of an agroturismo or something like that, and you're like, oh, it's beautiful countryside around it. There is a small to medium chance that they took the picture in such an angle where it looks like it's a beautiful, unbothered bit of countryside. And it could be to the left and right of it are like a used car lot and like a tile store or something.
And that's not everywhere. I mean, Basilicata definitely has completely untouched land around. Where we are, not so much.
No.
It is a bit crazy here.
Yeah.
Because it is, like Nathaniel's saying, it'll be like an agroturismo, which is beautiful. And then, right at their property line is a factory.
And it kind of happens with there's no zoning. Shop. Yeah, no, there's no zoning laws. And then people who owned, like a family who owned one large parcel of land, whoever owned it died, left it to their children or whoever, their nieces, whoever they hated, I guess, because then people sold it off for like $6 each. And then 6 different companies bought it. And now you have like, I don't know, just a random assortment of things. And the idea, because in the North, we've talked about this before, they very much leaned into the idea of an industrial zone, which was just supposed to be both factories, but shopping, malls, office parks, that kind of stuff was all in the industrial zone. So you have farms in the beautiful untouched countryside, and you have the industrial zone, and you have a city, and they're not like
separated.
Yeah. And here, the industrial zone, while it kind of caught on, never really caught on.
It's like if you look in Google Maps when you're driving around, it will say something is an industrial zone. Yeah. But it doesn't look any different than the non-industrial zones, to be honest.
Well, and I think the biggest way to Naples, I think, is one of the biggest. We had friends basically who when they came to Italy, they landed in Florence, and they're like, it's beautiful, it's everything we imagined Italy to be. It's rolling hills, it's cypress trees, it's old stuff, it's gorgeous. And then they came to Naples, and they're like, oh, is this what Italy really is like? Because it is chaotic. It is a very beautiful, incredibly chaotic. I don't even know how to explain it. It's like a city that's literally. I mean, it's while I guess like the roots of Naples are older than the roots of Rome. To give an example, it's like Naples, Napoli in Italian. Actually, the word Neapolitan comes from obviously Naples, but it's the Greek word is Neapolis, which meant new city, and I'm like, that was before Rome was a city.
Yeah.
It's just one of those ideas that, like, when you're walking around Naples, there really is this feeling that you are probably seeing like grit and grime and graffiti and
it's
things
like 1,000 years old.
Yeah, that have been people have been seeing for thousands of years. And so it's kind of at a certain point, like, how do you clean that? How do you maintain that? Like, even a lot of the street of Naples is these giant volcanic bricks. And they are not smooth. They're not even. I mean, they're very smooth, but they're not even. They don't meet up at the edges. It's not like, oh, that's a nice road. It's like just this, everything is chaotic. And I think the reason I mention that, because even when you take a train in, I mean, you're passing by like these, what looks like nuclear reactors. They're very much not, but like what looks like these containment chambers for something. And then you're like, oh, apartment building. And then you're like, oh, there's the cooling tower from a cement factory. And then another apartment building. And like, I mean, it's just, but I mean, and I say apartment building, like it's a cute, like in the middle of the country, be like a 4-family duplex, quadruplex. They have their laundry out. They have some flowers in the balcony. And there's this like column next to them just pumping out steam or something. And I think the Naples is a good example of just chaos, and I think all of Italy has a love-hate relationship with Naples, because it's sort of the pinnacle of there are no zoning laws. You have farms in the middle of just what there really should not be farms, but also they should not have been building stuff in the first place. I feel like no, and there's also still like there's a lot of like sustenance fishing, despite the fact that I cannot imagine the Bay of Naples to be very clean.
Yeah.
So that is all to say is if you're looking for a very authentic slice of Italy, if you want to know what it would have looked like before, I'm not sure when before is, I just mean but before, I think Naples is very much the place to go. But it is just, I guess I'm saying all this because I think when I first went to Naples, I think people talk about the Spanish Quarter, and it's all yellow, and it's beautiful, and it's charming, and I went there, and I'm like, this is terrible. This cannot be what I heard about. This is awful. And then it kind of takes like a second, like a day or two to see it, and then it's just, and then you see it, and then
there's a very different. I mean, Italy is one country now, but it's very different places. I mean, it's like any country. Like it's not all. I was going to say monogamous. It's not all homogenous. So Florence is Italy and is Italian and is beautiful and is largely clean and organized, and Naples is not any of those things, but it's equally amazing and beautiful, but completely different.
There's also, and I think we mentioned in some episode, in the 90s, it was very much a do not go to Naples for any reason whatsoever. You will be kidnapped and possibly murdered. And to this day, which is not that later, it's about 20-something, 30 years later, there's still a lot of people who refuse to go to Naples, especially people in their 50s and 60s.
But it's changed dramatically.
Oh, yeah, it's changed
crime-wise,
massively. Yeah. People still have the opera there. We have a friend who's like part of the Napolitano opera, and who, he's sung in Paris and in Barcelona. I mean, with the Parisian opera, the Barcelonian opera, and he's like, oh, but Naples is where it's at. Like, you can't, this is it. And so there are so many people who basically have that, like, I don't know. It's like the idea that Naples is the pinnacle of authenticity because they still have not been. I know. It's basically it feels like it's been unchanged for 2,000 years.
Yeah,
and
they've very much stayed themselves.
No effect on it, and it's changing today. Unfortunately, it's definitely like there are big box stores going in and this and that, but it's still very much like not. So all that is being said is the zoning, the infrastructure, the chaos. If you really want a slice of what the chaos we're talking about, go to Naples. Spend half an hour at a cafe and just watch as this, as this world.
I was going to say people watching, but like life watching in Naples
it's unparalleled.
Chef's kiss.
Chef's kiss. So what is next?
Well, kind of related. I just want to quickly say that there was an earthquake in 1980.
Oh, the big one.
The big one. It's related to architecture is what I'm talking about it.
I think the one that was just the other day that might wipe half of Naples off the map. But no, you mean the big one.
Yeah, not that one. The other one. In 1980 or around 1980?
No, I think 1980.
Okay. That decimated a lot of the Southwest or the entire South.
I would say the Southwest, but it could be the entire South.
And because of that, there are still very much like we live in a little medieval. Is that our city, our town? Okay. Little medieval city. Up on a town. Sorry.
City is very much the wrong impression.
It's very much a small town. Sorry. On a sort of hilltop, mountaintop. But it is in an area where the earthquake decimated many of the homes, and because of that, all over our region and also Calabria, Basilicata, people's homes were destroyed and they had to rebuild. So a lot of people moved to more flat areas so they were not on the edge of a mountain or hill.
Strange decision.
And that's because Italy basically had enforced that when new homes are built, that they are built safe from earthquakes, because it is a highly earthquake-prone country and area specifically.
Yeah.
So people moved to flat areas so that their homes could be easily made earthquake-safe, and so they wouldn't have to rebuild again. So a lot of buildings and like traditional architecture was destroyed. Not everything. I mean, there's tons to see here. It's old and beautiful and amazing. But there's also a lot of 1980s construction because of the earthquake here.
Yeah. And if I may, just for anybody who's likes words and is persnickety about the use of words, decimate means to reduce by 1/10. So it's
What? Oh my God, like Desi.
Yeah. So it's very much destroyed. I think
Yeah, it was more than decimated.
Yeah, it's more than this. I only say because decimate sounds so like decimated, and it's
does.
like, wait, by 1/10.
Why do we even have a word for that?
I know, what a ridiculous. I mean, somebody.
I mean, it's not. I mean, it's still bad if something's destroyed by 1/10, but.
But like I decimated that banana. You had a tenth of the banana. Like wow. No, so I wanted to think that just for that example of, and even where we live, it's funny because it's. For anyone listening, if you've ever seen those pictures of like Detroit pre and post 2007, it's a really good example of that. Like you have pre 2007 pictures of these neighborhoods around Detroit, and I'm using Detroit because that was one of the worst hit areas in 2007, and they are beautiful houses, not beautiful houses like new houses, but like 1920s, 1930s houses.
And well taken care of and lived in.
And they're well taken care of. They got lawns and they're, blah, blah, blah. It's gorgeous. And then there's like, taken in 2020 or 2022, and they're just rotting, falling apart, overgrown lawns, and everybody lost their money and had to move out of there. That's very much how a lot of the towns are in the South, specifically the one we live in. Some parts of it really nice, but other parts of it, whether it was just smacked into my little mic thing there, I'm just going to keep rolling though. I talk with my hands a lot, by the way, so if you hear just random bumps, I apologize. It's me talking with my hands. It's not because I'm Italian. It's just because I'm larger than life. It's a charming thing, I think. No, but I didn't say like so. These like half of this town is basically unlived in, simply because. Well,
I mean, if you could see some of the houses around us, like almost connected to our house, because that's the way houses are built here. They share walls. Because of the earthquake, many of them, like the floors just fell out. So like the walls are still standing, but people moved out because it's not safe. And you can look into these buildings and see like things still on the shelves and like just a couple random things people left in their houses because they didn't take everything with them. And it's not like they died.
Oh no, it was middle of the morning and middle of the night, and they basically ran out of their house, and then they came back and like, well,
that's not great. And so then they moved down the valley, built a new house, and they're totally fine. It's not. I just want to say it's not like a horrific story, but many of these houses right around the corner from us, the shell of the house is still left, but the inside is completely gone.
And even the one we live in now, I mean, it's still here, but they threw like a steel I-beam down in the bottom floor to hold up the house. I'm not sure if it's doing anything. I like to think it is, but it's like, it's all these wooden beam construction, just like it is in the north, that they kind of created the floors and the ceilings. And if they got cracked and they couldn't hold up the weight above them, obviously, then they're gone. But when there's no money and this and that, and obviously, how can you earthquake-proof a stone and wooden beam house? You can't. You can't put shock absorbers in the bottom. But so as you mentioned, they just move out there. Plus, they coincided with the rise in car ownership. So basically, people who could not park their car on these ridiculous tiny donkey roads, I think what they're called, right? I don't know.
And that's not a derogatory term. That's what they're for.
Right, they're for donkeys. They're weirdly, there's one still in town that is still used for bringing stuff up and down the mountains.
A donkey?
Yeah.
There's a couple donkeys in town, but that one he's used.
That one's famous for working. He's a working donkey. The rest are just for show. No, but I think that's just something to keep in mind is the South is very 1980s in the worst possible way. Yeah. And it's because they basically built things in the 1980s that look horrific. And I think they looked horrific then. I think they look horrific now.
It was not a shining time for architecture.
Yeah, it was also like the sort of, and it's a slightly off topic, but very much on topic in the sense of Matera, which we just talked about in the last episode. We talked about this episode. It's in Basilicata. It was forcibly abandoned, I guess, between the 50s and the 70s. And not everybody left, but most people are very much forced to leave. And they were moved outside of Matera into these apartment blocks because essentially there's this cholera epidemic and they're like, we have to move you out. You people are filthy. It was, again, one of those classic North versus South things.
That's just clarified. That's not you saying they were filthy. That's what the
Italian government said.
Yes.
Yeah. And so, no, basically they were moved into these avant-garde apartments. And apparently at the time it was very avant-garde to think you don't need natural light. And so they have very little natural light. And yeah, I think that's the thing around here. It's like there's some natural light, but you go from this place, this like gorgeous stone home and these things, and they're built on a hill, so you have this view to like an apartment building built right next to another apartment building that has a view of a street. And
also next to the butcher and the tire shop.
Yeah, and just, I mean, it's really awful. So, but people seem to really like it. So, more power to them.
one quick thing before we get off of architecture.
Yeah, Darcy, you spent a long time on this one.
Is the South has a whole bunch of ruins.
Yes.
So even though an earthquake came through, lots of stuff is still standing.
Came through.
Yeah,
visited for a week or two.
That's a good point. It doesn't come through. It just happens.
Yeah.
So there was a horrible earthquake, but there are so many ancient Roman and Greek. Okay.
And there's some Etruscan. There's a couple,
Etruscan,
actually,
right?
weirdly, even though the Etruscans are very much in the north, we found it recently, there were a couple random Etruscan settlements in the south.
One next town over,
Yeah,
right?
Lucanian especially, though. That's a lot of Lucanian ruins. Roman, Greek, Lucanian, and then like random bits of Etruscan here and there. Weirdly, also like some, like in the Saracen Raiders, I think is what they were called, came over from Turkey. They basically had like in control of some areas for a while. Like Bari, I think, was under control for 80 years. But no, there's still like some architectural sort of things still left from like, again, people who come and drop off their food and their language and leave.
So I would say there's more and older. There's more ancient architecture in the south than there is in the north.
Yes,
there
for
are
sure.
like Etruscan walls in, like we've talked about, Perugia, and there are still ancient
It's
bits.
still a Colosseum, but
Well,
which is pretty old.
Yeah, well, Rome is like the dividing line.
What I was thinking, even Rome is still like, Rome is old, but then you have down here like Pestrum.
Oh,
It's
right,
probably
it's even
500
older.
or 600 years old than that. And then you
Right.
have, I think we talked about this in some episode. I love it. It's my favorite little thing. But you have Archimedes, as we mentioned last episode, who's from Sicily, never left Sicily, born and died in Sicily. And, you know, he was Greek his whole life. So it's just like, but that was such an old city before Rome was doing anything. Before any of these places, like even Naples was doing anything, you had Syracuse is what it is still. So that's just some example, as you mentioned, like the sort of old like a lot of the ruins here are ancient instead of like, oh, that's kind of
It's
old.
old, yeah.
I mean, they really learned how to build stuff better, I think, though. I mean, I don't know. Some stuff looks really nice in the north, I'll be honest.
Yes.
They knocked the dome out of the park. Both of them. The two still standing.
But there are older domes in the south.
That's true. There are older domes. So I think that's everything for architecture, basically, the earthquake. The one, actually, very last brief thing I did want to mention, just in case, because it's a weird little fact, we were in Scalea for a little bit in Calabria, and one thing you're going to notice about Scalea is that the town of Scalea is the old town of Scalea, sort of reaches down, and there's a bit of a wall, and you'd think there's like a coast would start around there, and it doesn't. It starts like, I don't know, 100 yards or so out, maybe a little bit more. It doesn't really seem to make sense. We started asking
So it's
around.
like the old town isn't connected with the beach.
Yeah.
It's weird.
But it wouldn't make, and then of course there's photos that say that that show that it is. And if we asked around and basically said no, after the earthquake, it basically either pushed up sand or something with sand and created this massive coastline that it didn't exist before. And now they built on it, so that's not gonna be a problem. Don't worry, you guys. Building on sand's always gone well. But no, so apparently that's the it's just fascinating how it's changed coastline up and down.
Yeah.
And which is only because, I mean, there's a lot of these places that were Pestrum and Ostia Antica, which mentioned what used to be a port city, and now it's very much not near the port. But between silt from rivers and between earthquakes and things like that, it's just coastline has changed over the years.
Yeah, definitely.
So now, what's next? Now that I've finished my
So this is my favorite
Okay.
thing for the podcast today that I want to talk about.
saving the best for last, like dessert.
Yes. Okay, so Italy, Catholic country. Most of us know that.
It's actually hugging the most Catholic country on earth. I'm just saying it's the Vatican's inside of Italy, and it's kind of hugging it.
Yeah, it's like cradled around.
Yeah. Not San Marino. Nobody cares about San Marino.
So, when the Piedmont essentially came and told the rest of what is now Italy, hey, you guys, we're all going to be Italian. They said some not very nice things about what they believed to be what they called Southern Italy. And they were like, those people are pretty dumb. They don't have any good financial infrastructure, and they are, what is the word? Superstitious. And so,
I imagine savages came over there at some point because I think
yeah, there were a lot
stuff
of
about
horrible things that they said about Southern Italy and Southern Italians, or the people who are now Southern Italians. So they were like, ugh, they're superstitious. They believe in all these crazy things like the evil eye and witches and curses and all this stuff. And it probably was true because it's still true, and I love that. And even in the town where we are, people are Catholic. I'm shrugging my shoulders. people
Italians shrug.
Yeah, it is.
The
It's totally
Catholic.
Italian shrug. People are Catholic, but there's still this like grasp on, I'm gonna say pagan ideas.
Yeah, could be Lucanian, could be
Yeah.
Greek, could be something else. Who knows?
I mean, your mom has a neighbor who's like who can take the evil eye off people.
Yeah.
And in every older home that you go into, there's an upside down horseshoe to ward off evil. And
There's like people still described as witches here. It's like,
Yeah.
so-and-so's a witch. Yeah, they'll help you out if you need something. If you need like, herbs and this and that and the other thing.
and there are just the regular superstitions that a lot of people have, but they've really remained in the South, more so than it seems like in the North. And I just find that.
But also, I think it goes back to that I mentioned earlier this episode, is like how the south middle of the south middle of Italy was quite insulated from the rest. It wasn't strategically important. While yes, there was Catholicism, the Roman Empire was spreading Catholicism, and there was a Roman road going through where we live. In fact, it still was not like
people weren't like
Yeah.
really like, yeah, Catholicism, love
and
it.
there's for
We're
sure
gonna adopt it now.
churches. Yeah, I don't want to say there's no churches, but it's also like a lot of these even churches. There are so many caves around here that have been converted into churches, but are much, 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 much older than Catholicism, and much older than
and used
the
for
church.
other purposes,
Yeah.
like other religions or other practices. Yeah.
Finding bones and skeletons of well before Catholicism, and even artifacts that could have been used for religious events, not events, but practices. No, there's the it was ruined recently. There's a book written in published in 1950, I think. It's by Carlo Levi or Levi. 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 I don't know how to pronounce it in Italian.
Levi.
In Italian, Levi.
Oh, in
Levi.
Italian, Levi.
Levi. Okay, it sounds very French. Levi. And basically, he was exiled by the fascists to not like out of Italy, just to the south of Italy. And so he was basically forced to live in Matera, around Matera, in Basilicata, and sort of wrote not great about it, to be honest. He was there's in his book he was talking about this very north versus south sort of behavior, and sort of it's that classic. The North had no real idea what the South was, I guess, going through, like what life was like. But they're like, I know how to fix it, and it's like, cool, go there and then fix it. But not just stop making rules from Rome.
Yeah.
Go to
We
the
have
South.
no idea what these people's lives are like. Absolutely.
And that was a big thing, and he wrote about Matera. But and for anyone who's never heard about Matera, by the way, it's one of the oldest troglodyte examples of troglodyte living, which is a cave, humans living in caves. And there's like a handful around the world of still intact troglodyte settlements, for lack of a better word. And Matera is one of the more, it's because it was never fully cleaned out of people, so to speak. It was like people still lived there. It's considered one of the oldest continuously inhabited cities as well, because you had people from well before this was, even before the Greeks came here, you had people living there. And because it's in a ravine, and the Sassi of Matera is sort of in a bowl, it's quite difficult to see. Even driving to Matera, you can't see any of the old part, and anywhere around it, you can't see the old part. It's quite a hidden old city unless you're coming from one very specific direction. So all that is being said is, sort of basically it had been great for, something like 8,000 odd years. And
there's
then
also all the caves, and I would say cave system that goes along that kind of ravine.
Yeah, and that was
which
the
are
original caves.
Yeah, and those are no longer inhabited, but they
Yes,
still
sorry.
are there, and you can visit them. It's amazing.
And it's interesting because a lot of those were apparently churches, and they had their graveyards on top instead of on, because obviously you can't, how do you go down in a cave? No, you stick the bodies on top.
Interesting.
And of course, a lot of these, they're finding out, I say now, because again, they just to give some very brief history, I apologize, but just because it's interesting, it gives an idea of this sort of north versus south idea. Like, the idea of like basically humans living in caves was very upsetting for a lot of Northerners. And as we're finding out now, though, they're very, very intricate, for lack of a better word. Houses are connected underground through these cave systems. You had different storage rooms. You had different... it was basically, part of it was because it's hot in Matera, let's be honest. It's ridiculous. It's kind of deserty. They built an enormous cistern sometime in the 1800s, I want to say, maybe earlier than that. It's considered a water cathedral, but basically like huge. It's a couple football fields big, underwater, vaulted ceilings, the whole 9 yards. They had I think in the 90s, they had some scuba divers in there to kind of go exploring because it had been walled up when different pipes basically were invented. And they didn't really need the cistern anymore, so they walled it up and I guess never, ever, ever wrote about it. because people had forgotten it was there. And then they found it, and like, that's wild. And so in the 50s, basically, even though these towns were, it was a very poor, and a lot of it was because of unification, sort of everybody then, all the work went to the north, and everybody left. No, basically it was destroyed by the unification. It was fine-ish before that. I mean, saying fine in very loose terms before that, but destroyed by the unification. So it was one of those things when Carlo Levi or Levi was, I'll say Levi in case instead of the Italian, but I don't know, yeah, Levi, was exiled to Matera. He sort of he wrote about it in his memoir called Christ Stopped at Eboli, which, as it is, in case you remember from the transportation segment of this episode, Eboli is a town kind of north of where we are. It used to be a hub of where north-south met east-west, basically. And I believe the old Roman road that connects to the Appian Way, which is outside of Rome, but the Roman road that comes from here, it goes through Eboli and ends up outside of Rome in the Appian Way. But basically the idea is Catholicism stopped at Eboli, so they basically never hit this far south. And he's like, they're still very superstitious. They're still very, warding off the evil eye, doing things that are just, that we civilized Northerners consider ridiculous. And of course, when the book gets published, the government cannot handle the blight on Italy, I guess, that is Matera. So essentially they kind of kicked everybody out, and part of it was they had cholera and things. It was not the cleanest living, which, I guess there wasn't really a sewer system happening. Yeah. That's part of the issue. But no, one of the best idea they had for a while was kick everybody out and wall up the city so nobody can ever see it again. Which is wild because now, of course, if you've ever been, it's a gorgeous... It's
beautiful, yeah.
Yeah, it's just wild. And of course, you might have seen it if you've seen, I think, Mel Gibson's Passion of Christ. There's, a couple of opening minutes of the new No Time to Die or No Time to Live, the new James Bond movie. There's a couple other... Ben-Hur, which I never saw, but that takes place in... All of these things are filmed in the Sassi and Matera because, again, it looks sort of very... it looks like it's thousands of years old, and it is. So all that I say is a very long-winded way of saying, though, is while this idea of I don't know, this sort of pagan idea has existed for a while, it was super, I think, nobody really talked about it until some guy kind of made it really apparent. And then it's you couldn't avoid it anymore, and because it caused all sorts of stirs, and everybody's like, oh, how are we going to change this? And everyone's like, don't. Just leave us alone. Yeah.
And now it's both. People are very much Catholic, but still believe in pagan sort of ideals, and superstitions and all these great things. And I think it's maybe an interesting time for Italy because grandparents believe in these things. Grandparents are the ones who can take off the evil eye and are the witches and things like that. And there's been a resurgence of people being excited to be witches and all these kind of other things. And those are now the grandkids who have those ideals. So they've skipped over some generations of that we have in the West of not liking that, or in maybe Northern Italy of not liking that. And now we're just at this interesting point where, my grandma's a witch, I am too.
Exactly,
that sort of thing.
And I think, I don't know if Italy ever had witchcraft trials like we had in England and America.
That's a good question.
So I don't know if it was ever
tell people.
Yeah, no, because I'm thinking as you just mentioned, people's grandparents still practice things, but it's I don't know. I guess what I was trying to give I don't want to give the impression that it's I don't know. It's when you had a headache, or I think one of us had a headache, and we were mentioning it to a neighbor, and she's like, "Yeah, go to so and so. They'll take the evil out of you. Somebody probably just cursed you. Don't worry about it." But it wasn't. It was in the same way. It's take an aspirin, you'll be fine.
It's quiet. It's quiet.
Yeah,
it's not.
It's someone's a witch. They can help you out. No, don't even worry about it. You'll be fine. And it's and I think it's not. I think it's not oh yes, you have the evil eye. It's yeah, man, somebody cursed you. These people, everyone's just throwing curses around. You got to duck and dodge your way around town.
And herbalism is, I say herbalism as if there's apothecaries and wizards. No, but it's just instead of taking chemicals and hard drugs we're prescribed in the U.S., you're still prescribed them here if you have something serious going on.
For sure.
But the first step is some sort of herbal
it's always
remedy.
Oh my God, I love it, but it's also a little. As an American, I'm can I have the real drugs, please? Please, can I have the real drugs? Just try rubbing this on for 3 to 4 weeks. No, there is a lot of
Like,
that. Is
this is cranberries
Yes.
and witch hazel, and there's some rosemary in there, you know?
Yeah, exactly. Which is, I mean, nice. And some of the body creams smell amazing.
Oh, amazing. Yeah.
But I'm thinking also a lot of people do tinctures, like olive leaf tinctures and St. John's wort and this and that. And there's a woman across the valley who I think does a lot of that kind of stuff. She's like a lot of growing and tincturing and drying and this and that. But it's not even considered, I don't know, it's like still medicine.
It's not considered fringe or anything.
Exactly.
It's just what people do.
That's step number one. And then if that didn't work, then you go there. And if that didn't work, then maybe you can consider some, which I'm not, again, when we talk about healthcare in the South, this is a little bit of a history of why the healthcare maybe has never caught on as well in the North. I don't know. Maybe
Still using willow bark.
Still chewing some willow bark. I mean, it's willow trees growing everywhere around here. That guy's probably forever old because he's never going to die.
All right.
That everything?
I think that's everything.
We hit religion and then we're done?
Yep. That's it. That's the story of life.
Yeah. It's also so, actually, last thing, I'm just thinking with the caves thing too. It's like, you would not know that God and Jesus had anything to do with Catholicism down here. Because it's always a saint. There's always some saint
And
there.
Mary.
And Mary. There is like always
Mary
a
is
saint
huge.
and Mary they're worshiping. And it's like, I don't know, you must never hear Jesus or God. But like, Saint Michael, all the time. Saint Ignacio, Saint. So it's like every day.
Every town has a patron saint.
Yeah, and every town like worships like predominantly that saint, and it's like, oh yeah, Jesus, he is there. I think somewhere.
There's also like the
statue.
thank you Jesus, thank you God.
Yeah.
Like I'm saying it like I'm saying an American prayer, but you know there's
Is
the
that how you do it in
thing.
America? Thanks Jesus, thanks God, appreciate it, helping out.
They're the nomine Padre, Filii,
Oh,
Spiritus
Spiritus
Sancti.
Sancti.
Yeah, they say that, but and then they'll like you. There's a lot of processions in our town
Tons
and
of
in small
processions.
towns, and everybody walks through. They're like nomine Padre, blah, 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 blah. But then they like sing a song about Mary, and it's
Yeah,
like
oh my
all the
God.
women in the town just like really loving this song, and you can tell there's a different energy around
Yeah.
it. Yeah.
No, it's fascinating. I think that's interesting because it is, as you mentioned, it's like it's not so much that it never really caught on. It's just that it's never. I don't know. It's just sort of
It's a
just
different
like
spirit.
yeah, and it's also like I mean, it's like so many people who are Catholic, but it's like oh my God, the last time some of these people went to church was never.
Yeah.
It's like yeah, I mean I'm Catholic, but loosely. Like somebody splashed me with water 80 years ago, and
Or the women who, like, not women, but I just think of grandmas all the time, who still go to church every day, but they're like, yeah, but I
For the
kinda
music.
yeah, or like, yeah, but I interpreted this part differently.
yeah,
This
that's a
is
big
how
thing.
I think
yeah,
of it, you
there's a
know?
lot of that interpretation because religious schools used to be big down here, like religious boarding schools, but then. It's kind of like that only bred, it seems like, a group of people who now are like...
Are very against that institution, yes.
We're like, well, here's where they went wrong. So no, all that is to say is the South is still, obviously, like Italy is still, I mean, a Catholic country, but I don't know. It's a very nuanced relationship with religion. Like I know a lot of people, we know people who are atheists who are like, don't want to go to churches, which is, again, you've got to go to some of these churches. I mean, they're phenomenal. It's also... Let's be honest, I don't think they were decorated or built by anybody who was remotely religious because...
Yeah. Oftentimes people who were painting and decorating them
Yeah, had
hated
no
the church.
interest in... But the church was like, we'll
They
pay
just
you a
need the money.
lot of money.
Yeah.
And the guy's like, yeah, what do you need? A brain? I could paint a brain. I'm thinking
See a lot of brains in churches?
that's the whole thing with the Sistine Chapel is like Adam touching God, but God's supposed to be in the shell, but the shell is actually what the brain looks like.
Oh, yeah, you're right. Yeah.
So it's supposed to be the subtle... And I mean, I don't think anybody actually knows because that would be... real subtle and really feels like treasonous to put that in the Sistine Chapel, but hey, could be. Is that everything? Have I rambled on it? I've made this too long than it needs to be. I've put an extra 5 minutes on this.
Yeah, I think that's good.
Cool. Well, yeah, I'm glad. I hope some of this is helpful. I know it wasn't a lot of it. Like you're not taking notes on whether Catholicism is still big in the South, but I guess it's more just, things to expect. Basically, that's all. It's just things to expect. And as two people who live in the South, I think we have a very soft spot for the South.
Yes.
While we both very much enjoy the North.
And its organization.
And the fact it's very clean. I'd say that it's not like people are dirty down here. It's not another thing that's dirty. It's just...
Oh, yeah. Like, it's not like people are dirty or anything like that. It's just more chaotic and unorganized.
And I think... So I know now I'm making this longer than it needs to be, but very quickly, I think it came from a time when everything you own is degradable, like biodegradable. Like, if something breaks, it's wood, it's metal, it's stone. You can throw it out. If it's an earthenware flask or jar, you could throw it out in the garden. And I think now that so many things are not biodegradable, but the idea of it hasn't really left the people's minds, so to speak. I mean, because there's still, this is Italy. Let's be honest. You walk any direction, you're going to find, some site where they dumped a bunch of old olive oil jars from 700 years ago. And then right next to it is where they dumped a bunch of tiles from a house they had to renovate 2 weeks ago. So it's a little bit like, I don't know. I think that there's just when I say it's dirty, I just mean like this idea of don't throw trash into the river hasn't really like made
Caught
sense.
on, yeah.
Yeah, it hasn't really caught on. Not to mention that I think part of the issue is too, there's just simply like, as we found too, like, especially in small towns, and even I think it like, I wonder if Naples has it, probably not though, but in small towns, trash is picked up every day. It's a different day of the week is something else is picked up, whether it's your compost or your regular trash or the
Plastic trash or aluminum, yeah.
And often, honestly, if you put it out on a stormy night because, you know, you want to get picked up the next morning, there's a chance that it will tear out of wherever you hung it up, and then there'll be trash all over the ground. So if you don't clean it up, or even if you do clean up some of it, you don't realize the rain washed a bunch of trash down the street. Or, I mean, sometimes there are dogs, and if you don't put your compost high enough and you put meat in the compost, the dogs will definitely get to it. And not just necessarily wild dogs. Like sometimes
people just let their dogs out for an evening walk by themselves.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. It's like letting your grandfather just go take. I always was afraid. It's like, Grandpa, just go take a walk, come back in 5 minutes, and if you're not here, we'll send for somebody for you. It feels like that with a dog. Like everyone's just sort of like, my dog's been gone for a while. I should start calling just generally. And I feel like I see a cartoon on that when I was younger. I have much of this idea though, the grandfather taking a walk around the block for some reason. Anyway, all that is to say is, sometimes there will be random dogs that are very much have homes, but smell meat and they're like, I might just have a little nibble before I go home. And they don't care that it's in a bag on the hook of something. They'll try to get to it. So I don't want to give the impression that it's dirty because people don't care. It's just more dirty because it's just trying to break 100-year-old cycles in 20-something years is not that easy.
Yeah, I agree.
Is that everything?
Yeah, I think so.
I think we've really covered it now.
I think we've really thoroughly covered it.
And in the next episodes, I think we're going to start talking more about the cities in depth, the cities we like, the cities we visited, sort of like we did in the north. And then we're going to find something else to talk about because we could talk a lot about Italy. But we hope you enjoyed this episode. And thank you so much for listening.
Thanks for listening to all of our comparisons between the north and the south.
Yes, we really appreciate it. If you'd like to support us, we'd love the thumbs up, the like, the subscribe, the rating, the following, the not rating with a D, rating with a T.
Are we going to put a link to Trusted House Sitters?
Yeah,
in
we'll
this
throw
episode?
a link.
In case you want to use our affiliate link to buy Trusted House Sitters to go house sit.
Yes, we would love it if you do. It's like $150 a year, I think, is the beginning package, opening package, small basic package. I don't know what they're calling it. No, we basically use it to house sit anytime we house sit. And we have had 5 episodes on that, as well as 5 articles on that. So if you're interested in house sitting, we'd love for you to check those out. But until next time, thank you so much for listening.
Yeah, thanks for listening. We'll talk to you soon.